Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. Gonna talk today to Alex Bello and Cate Fogarty, and hopefully Adam Handsome if he's here, but he might not be able to make it. So, um, wanted to talk about a few different subjects, and we don't have that much time, so we'll get to whatever we have time to get to. But wanted to talk about gender roles and also like the Vikings because we alluded to that and like just the Middle Ages in general and Alfred the Great and fun topics like that the last time you and I talked, Alex, with Adam as well. And then also Israel Palestine, because I know you've been to Palestine and your work and you're setting up a beer company with a brewery based in Palestine. So maybe you know a little bit about what's actually going on there since you've been there. And this is an endlessly confusing issue to me. And then also, I think there might have been a few other topics, but I think that's it. That's a good start. But do you guys want to introduce yourselves to start off with there?
Yeah, sure. I'm Alex. We've got we've got a lot of topics, I guess. So maybe we'll, given the time crunch, we might have to shorten that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd be happy to talk about any of those either today or at a later date. But yeah, I am starting a beer distribution company, and we're getting our beer from Palestine right now. So we're working on getting in a couple of restaurants in the DC area. So it's kind of what I'm working on now.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's so exciting. So
Yeah.
are you no longer doing software engineering or what you were doing?
We didn't quit our day jobs. I'm working with my sister. We both live in DC, and we are just kind of like bootstrapping this. So we're going to see DC is actually a really hospitable place for beer, especially as a distributor. So we pretty much just pay like sales tax, and it was kind of a complicated process to get a license, but once you have it, it's like very, very simple. So we're just getting the beer ourselves and delivering ourselves, and
That's awesome. I love it.
Work. Yeah.
What's the name? What can you say the name?
Our distribution company is called No Rules, but the beer is called Taiba. So
does that mean something?
Taiba is the name of the village that it comes from.
Okay.
So currently they started about 20 years ago, and they're actually a Christian family that started it, but they're Palestinian and they live in the West Bank. And they actually employ like 80% of the town now.
Oh, wow.
They've grown a lot, and they actually ship to Boston in the US. They have a distributor up there, but it's nowhere else. So we're getting our shipments from Boston for now, and we're going to see like how that goes. And then hopefully we can just import directly into DC eventually.
So, like, how many Christians are in Palestine, or what would you say is like the rough proportion?
I honestly don't know the proportion. There aren't a ton. I mean, I can't give you numbers, but I would say most people there are either Israeli or Arab of some kind. I mean, there's a lot of demographics though, because you have Arab Israelis as well, who are kind of a mix and are sort of culturally different. And then there's a lot of immigrants from Europe, conservative Jewish people usually. Indigenous kind of people, and then you have a lot of immigrants, and Jerusalem just has like a ton of immigrants. There's also an Armenian group of people who are pretty much all Christian as far as I can tell. And actually, I don't know if you guys have been to Jerusalem, but the city itself is actually divided into four corners, the Armenian sector. So like there's actually enough Armenians around that you kind of notice it. So it's kind of it's a very diverse place. But it's segregated. You have to cross a lot of checkpoints to get someplace. So like if you want to go to a village like Taiba, you're usually places that aren't accessible for the Palestinians. So it's kind of an interesting place. I've never been somewhere quite like that. It's really good.
So did you guys just kind of fall into this, or did you go to Israel with this plan?
No, so we fell into the beer thing, but we have some really close family friends that we basically consider them our cousins, who are actually Palestinian. And so one of them is an audiologist, and she has been running her own clinic, and she actually does this cool charity program where she goes to places in the Middle East that don't have access to like good healthcare, and she fits people for hearing aids, or does she brings ENTs to kind of like do checkups and clean out earwax and do all the stuff that people here have
we take for granted,
very easy access to. And we were in a few refugee camps in different cities. And everywhere we went, we were drinking this beer because there's restaurants, and we were in some of the larger cities, at least the hotels. And we were like, this is great. I wonder if we can get it in America. And there was one importer. So we were like, well, let's see what this is like. And we started talking to the guy, and we thought, hey, this seems to be pretty easy. So we're going to try it.
Awesome. Well, good luck.
So what are the three segregated sectors other than Armenian?
There's the Christian sector, there's the Arab sector or the Muslim sector, and then there's the Jewish quarter. They call it quarters. I mean, that's kind of a misnomer because, like, if you walk down any street, you'll see things from all four cultures. There's churches in the Jewish quarter. There's, mosques in there's one big mosque, the Dome of the Rock, but then there's, smaller kind of like worship sites. So there's just like kind of everything all over, but they do technically segregate it by quarters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's so are some of those like in those segregated areas, like maybe not necessarily in those segregated areas, but in those four different groups of people, aren't all of each of them Arab?
Not necessarily.
No?
Yeah, Arab refers to that part of the world. But if you're an immigrant from Russia and you're an Orthodox Jew, you wouldn't be Arab. And there's lots of people like that. There are Christians who are sort of, like Armenia is actually like, I don't know if I would call Armenia Arab. I don't know what the actual terms are because I'm not one of them, so I don't know. I would consider it more European, but it's sort of in between. It has a lot of influences from both, and the Christians are definitely like more of an Orthodox Christianity, I guess, is what you would call it. But it's not quite like a Greek Orthodox or a Russian Orthodox. So they're different. They're their own group. But yeah, I guess a lot of them are probably ethnic Arab in some way, because they're all living so close together that like you would think there would be some kind of overlap, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting how different but also similar those any type of group of people can be.
Yeah, because they're all living in the same city, and the city does have its own rules. So it's a very complicated place, and you definitely feel a lot of like pressure when you're there because there's a lot of tension. There's like things happening. And especially when something will happen in like Gaza, or like if there's maybe like a violent attack somewhere else, like in the West Bank or something, you'll definitely hear about it and people get kind of antsy. I've never been to a place like that. That's the closest I've ever been to a war zone, I guess. So
okay.
But it's
Um,
it's really honestly like the day-to-day life it's not violent. If you're in, Jerusalem or Ramallah is the seat of the government for the Palestinians. It's a city. I mean, there's restaurants, there's shopping, there's they have like sort of like bootlegged stores. So they have Stars and Bucks instead of Starbucks, which is fun. The
Have you
food,
been to the Stars and Bucks today?
yeah, like that's like really what it is. So like life goes on, and they have the internet. They have like iPhones, everything that you have, that you and I have. So it's different on some days.
They have marijuana?
I don't think they smoke marijuana. That would be a good question. I mean, at least from my experience in the West Bank, everyone was drinking. So, maybe it would be like every other restaurant didn't have alcohol, but there were still a lot that did. So they're not like anti-drugs, I guess.
I know you told me that it's pretty easy to get alcohol there.
Yeah, very easy. Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
and it's not illegal or anything, so.
so before we go on with this, Kate, for people who don't know you, who are you?
Hi, sorry. I'm also cooking dinner.
Okay.
My name is Kate. I live in Los Angeles. I am a writer and a filmmaker, and I thought you wanted to talk about the Minnesota Vikings, the football team. No, I'm just kidding. I'm from Minnesota. So when anyone says Vikings, that's what we always think first.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah, I mean, what else do you want to know?
Did you say you were working on a new, what was it, a sitcom or something?
I am making a web series called Web Squad, and we shot the first episode, and I'm currently editing it, and it is fairly close to being done. I mean, you have to add music and that smaller stuff, but I am hoping that it'll be ready to show in about a month or so.
Awesome.
Pretty goofy and ridiculous, but lots of fun. So yeah.
Awesome.
That's cool. Where are you going to host it?
Probably YouTube and Vimeo, but mostly YouTube. I'll enter it in festivals and stuff, and see if other people love it as much as I do. That's always nice.
Yeah.
And then I have the second episode written already, and we'll shoot that as soon as we can get everybody's schedules aligned. So probably sometime this summer. And hoping to have those 2 episodes done by the end of the year. But yeah, doing that and writing a novel like Andrew is, and working on a documentary, and just some other writing projects and stuff like that going on.
What's your novel about?
It's about a family that hates each other, and the father is obsessed with Christopher Columbus. They live in the Midwest, like landlocked, and he's been building this sailboat in his backyard for like 10 years and never finishing it, like building in quotations, just saying he's working on it, but not really working on it. And then he finds out that he has terminal brain cancer, and through a series of events, the family ends up on a sailboat sailing across the Atlantic from Spain. They're following Columbus's route, and they sail from Spain to the Caribbean and don't kill each other along the way, and reconcile a lot of their issues. And yeah, I don't want to give away the ending, but yeah.
Okay.
It's a family dramedy.
Okay.
Cool.
What's the novel about?
Kind of like,
yeah. So to go back to what we were talking about, so what do you think of like the whole situation in general in Israel and Palestine, Alex, since you've been there? Because I know, like, for me personally, I've just found this whole situation to be endlessly confusing. But what I've figured out recently is that it seems like to just overly generalize massively, conservatives tend to be pro-Israel and liberals tend to be pro-Palestine, but it kind of seems like they're oppressive authoritarian regimes and a lot of violence on both sides. So I am really not sure about what's really going on.
Well, I don't want to monopolize the whole conversation, but like in broad strokes, I also am very confused, and everybody has just kind of shored up on their own sides and kind of like dug their heels in. And that's just sort of how, I mean, there's a whole history, and you can get into why, you know, certain people are upset with the other people. And yeah, there is a lot of violence on both sides. But it's a small country and there's not a lot of land. Part of the problem is that there's a lot more Arab people in the area than there are Jewish people. And it makes everyone uncomfortable. Part of it is influence from the United States or Europe or other countries like Iran. So it's all like, it's all kind of a big mess. And I think if you wanted to get a good handle on it, I would like go back and look at the history, because there's a lot that happened in the last 100 years that is kind of unique. And yeah, my recommendation would be to go back and look at the history. And then actually my friend, Ruby Kramer, who's a reporter, she's been on the Bernie Sanders trail this year. Her dad was a writer, and he wrote a book called How Israel Lost, and his name is Richard Ben Kramer. And he also wrote a lot of, he spent a lot of time writing about that area of the world, and he actually won a Pulitzer for it, I believe. So I would recommend checking out his stuff if you want more information.
Okay.
That was How Israel Lost.
That's the name of it. But like I said, he wrote a lot of articles and stuff too. So
I would add too, I don't think, like now, I think there's starting to be more of a divide between conservatives and liberals for pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, but I don't think that that was always the case. I think I just heard a article on the radio, whatever it's called, a show on the radio from the New Yorker, I believe, about the history of the Democratic Party and Israel. And so I think that they originally started out pro-Israel, and now there's becoming a shift. And so,
interesting. Yeah.
And so, like Alex said, I mean, I think it's very complicated. I've never been there. And you know, growing up in America, I never really heard that much pro-Palestinian support until I moved to Norway. And in Norway, they're a lot more pro-Palestinian than I ever felt the United States was growing up. Now I think things are starting to shift, like you said, a little bit between the political parties, but part of me feels like a lot of that is people that don't really understand what's going on and are just supporting their team.
Yeah.
But
I think in America, we have a really bad habit of just kind of writing over the rest of the world as though it doesn't really mean anything. We're very like American centric. So I think, like you said, Kate, most people didn't even know what was going on, let alone like have an opinion on the Palestinian people. So part of the service trip that we were doing, my cousins are basically trying to just educate people who can go on the trip. So like half of it is not even actually a service project. It's just a knowledge acquiring week.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and with the like when that whole area was set up in the first place after World War II, historically speaking, like it was sort of problematic from the get-go, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, there were already people there. That said, I think at the beginning, by and large, the Palestinians were welcoming because the Holocaust had just happened. It was such a tragic thing. Most people were very anti-Nazi, so it didn't maybe to a lot of people it seemed like a good idea at the time, and obviously didn't work very well. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I would just go back and look at the history if you want more information, because it's very complicated and a lot of stuff happens. It's like a very quickly paced story.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously I'm far from an expert on this whole situation, but it seems to me like there isn't really a good solution. I mean, I've heard good and bad arguments for like the supposed one state solution, two state solution, three state solution. I really don't know if there is a good solution.
Well, that's why we kind of wanted to help with, with our company as well. I mean, yeah, we want to like make some money. But part of it too is to just sort of bring the Palestinians back into the economic world, because when you start isolating groups of people as refugee camps do, they can't contribute. They can't use an education that they may have had at one point. And so they get more isolated and usually more extreme. And then also, I mean, they can't feed their families. So I think if we can sort of tie them into the economic world, then maybe something better will happen, even if it doesn't happen politically for a while.
Okay. So, I guess we probably only have time to go through one of those other topics that I mentioned. Which would you two prefer to go over with, between the Middle Ages and Vikings and Alfred the Great and all that kind of stuff, or gender roles? And we can go through the other one the next time we talk.
I will defer to Kate in this case.
I know so little about the Vikings and the Middle Ages. I feel like I know slightly more about gender roles.
You don't say.
We can talk about that.
Okay. So,
or I could just listen to you guys and be educated about the Middle Ages and the Vikings. I mean, I lived in Norway, but that doesn't make me an expert.
Well, I've just been reading about those sorts of issues a little bit lately, because Alex had mentioned the last time that her and Adam and I talked, or I think I should say she and Adam and I talked. That's a weird grammar thing that I always get wrong. But anyway, that you had been reading the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which was supposedly written by Alfred the Great. So I read that too, and then I've been reading some old Celtish and Irish literature, like Beowulf, and some old Irish literature and stuff. But maybe that would be more interesting to go with the next time we talk to, and to talk with Adam, because obviously you two can provide more of the opposite perspective on gender roles than Adam and I can, since you're women. But I think you and I talked about this a little bit before. I think at least once or twice, Alex. Like, we were talking about how in today's world, like, the gender roles for women have changed from the way they used to be. Like obviously a woman doesn't have to like get married and like be a stay-at-home mom and a homemaker and stuff like that. Like, most women work outside the home. And we were also talking before about how it seems like it seems lately, anyway, in recent history, like the more recent a generation is, the later they marry, the less likely they are to marry, and the less likely they are to have kids. Or if they do have kids, the more likely they are to have less kids. So, well, what do both of you think about that, and like how these changes in our culture impact other aspects of our culture, and why they might have come about and that sort of thing.
I mean, I don't know much about why. I just know that the more educated women are, the fewer children they have. And I think that probably goes along. I mean, there's probably a lot of different things going on with marriage. But I think children in general, once you're educated and you have resources, you can spend more time and energy on just a few kids instead of having like a lot of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that marriage started out as
I
a economic, financial arrangement way back in the day. Women weren't able to earn their own money. They were basically property. And so marriage was kind of like a way of combining two families. And as slowly over time, as women have gotten more and more freedoms and they get more economic and financial abilities, can't think of the right word, but opportunities, but also, I don't know what the word is. It's not mandate, but maybe it'll come to me later. It's daylight savings time. My brain is fried. But as more and more of that happens, they have more opportunities, more things to do besides just have children. There's a really interesting book called When It All Changed by Gail. I can't remember her name right off the top of my head, but she does a really good job of going through, I think it starts around the turn of the century to the present time, about what changed in American women's lives and why. And not everything that changed suddenly made women happier, but things shifted significantly. And she does a lot of interviews with actual women talking about their experience. It's when the slaves were freed and people started to consider everybody as people, it became very weird to ignore women, And so over time, and like I think in everyday life too, people started to see that like women that worked on farms were not shrinking violets. They did most of the work inside the home, but it was a lot of work. It was very strenuous. So I think the idea that women were incapable of doing things started to shift. And then with World War I, women started taking on a lot of jobs that men held traditionally, like reporters and factory workers and things like that. And then when the men came back, they were supposed to just give up those jobs and go back to what they've been doing before. And, women started to protest that, because if they weren't married, if their husbands had died or something had happened and they had families, or they just wanted their own agency, that's the word I was thinking of, agency, why were they supposed to just do something and do it really well when men were off fighting wars, and then when that ended, why were they supposed to give that up? So I think that was a huge shift. And also it's getting so expensive in America to have children that if you want an education and a career, and you don't have a great social net, like a lot of modern women don't, because we're smaller families or we live far from our families, it gets incredibly hard to have a child or 5,
Yeah.
So I think that's a big factor as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of people put time and effort into building their career, going to school, and then you think, oh, you got married, time to quit all that. Like, why did you just spend all that money on a degree and, do all the free internships and everything?
Yeah.
That's kind of a hard thing to balance.
Yeah. And like this sort of thing has changed so much too that like there's there's a woman I used to work with who I know who is a stay-at-home mom, and she is literally the only person I know who is a stay-at-home mom. Like, that's such a rare thing now. And like and in terms of what you were saying about marriage, Kate, too, that's interesting also because like it's interesting this notion of women as property that's still so it's so inlaid into the concept of marriage and the marriage contract and stuff. Like when my parents were still both practicing ministers, they were rare because they didn't say this thing like, do you give this woman to this man? Like, this woman is your property. Or is it okay if you give this property over to this guy? Now he controls this property here. It's interesting how those cultural customs are still seen like within a marriage, even though like things have obviously changed too. Like in terms of childcare as well, like here in Canada, for in terms of maternity leave, it can be either the man or the woman who takes it, or they can like switch back and forth too, because the the man doesn't have to necessarily be the primary breadwinner either.
Yeah, well, and I think more and more in America, women are becoming primary breadwinners. Uh, you know, whoever can make the most money needs to make the most money. I know at least a handful of stay-at-home dads, and it's not necessarily because that was the dream that they wanted. I think that they all really enjoy it, but their wives made so much more money that it just made economic sense for them to stay home and take care of the kids. Because childcare in America, I mean, it's going to cost you a minimum of probably 25 grand a year, 30 grand a year. That could be a whole salary. So sometimes people are just working to pay for daycare. And then it starts to be like, well, why are you not being with your kids if that's what you'd rather do and save that money?
Yeah, I knew a single mother who she was telling me once about how much daycare costs, and I was just fucking flabbergasted. She said, I don't remember the exact number she told me, but she said it costs something like $1,000 a month, which is like the same amount that a lot of people will pay for rent, if not more. And
I mean, that's cheap. I think $1,000 a month for daycare.
Wow.
I think that's pretty cheap.
Wow.
Yeah,
I know that I know that my friend pays $500 a week.
Holy shit.
Wow. Yeah. And you know, when you go to like a daycare center, I think it's pretty pricey. You could maybe get an au pair for cheaper. Like, there's different ways to do it, but
what's an au pair?
An au pair is a slave. No, it's a young person. I think maybe they're all girls, not boys, from Europe that comes and lives with your family in exchange for taking care of your children. And you usually give them like an allowance or, you know, whatever. But basically they get paid in room and board, and they're, you know, around 18, 19 years old.
Oh,
my friend had two.
South Americans. The trend in DC is South American people.
Oh, South Americans.
They speak a different language, and they want their kids to be bilingual.
Yeah.
So that's
yeah.
Oh, interesting.
That's true, from South America. It doesn't have to just be Europe. But yeah, my friend had an au pair from Russia and an au pair from Germany that lived with them.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And I mean, I don't know that it saves you a ton of money, because it's like having another person in your home that you provide for, but it might not be as expensive.
Do you have to like provide room and board for them?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and depending on how nice of a family you are, you give them a phone, you give them, you know, access to a car, gym membership, different things like that. Although I think that my friend was very generous, and some of the other au pairs that her au pair knew were not as lucky as that. So.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard of this before. So, I think like there's so many historical and cultural factors involved with how gender roles seem to change. But I think that like like one of them that people who watch my podcast know I like to talk about a lot is sex. And you know, part of the one of the cultural values that obviously has changed a lot, especially I don't know within like the past 40 or 50 years, is this idea that you know, you got to wait until marriage for sex. So that was another incentive to get married, because like guys would be like, oh fuck, I got to get married so I can get laid, man. And now obviously both men and women, like there's like most people have sex before marriage. Like I've never even met anyone who has waited until marriage to have sex, although there might have been a girl I went to high school with who might have said that she was waiting until marriage for that, but I don't remember for sure. But that seems like so rare in today's world.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like people always had sex before marriage.
Probably.
It was just that if you
Yeah, I
got
feel like they
pregnant,
just
then you
lied
had
more.
to get married. What's that?
I feel like they just lied more.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think with the invention of the pill, it gave women more control over, you know, their sexual agency. They could, um, you know, have sex without getting pregnant more
Yeah.
easily. And so, you know, I think people probably always had sex before marriage. I don't know to what extent. I don't know what I mean, I'm sure it's probably gone up, but I think it was a little bit more, if you got pregnant, then you were, you know, fucked.
Yeah.
Literally. But, you know, like, especially if you were a woman, maybe not so much if you were a guy, but, you know, there's like these horror stories of, I'm just thinking of like Irish girls that would get pregnant and then they'd be sent to these convents to have the baby, and the babies would be taken from them and then adopted out to people.
Oh wow.
You know, I, yeah, so I think, yeah, I don't know that people never had sex before marriage, but
Yeah,
so
I
I don't
wouldn't
know
say
how much
that.
of an
Yeah.
enticement it was to be like, oh, I have to get married so I can finally have sex. But I think it was maybe a little bit more, especially for women, like, oh, I can be a little bit more experimental or exploratory with sex than just whatever. You know, I know my parents had sex before they got married, although I think they were probably engaged at the time. But my dad definitely had sex before he met my mom, because he thought that his girlfriend was pregnant and they were going to get married. And this was in the late 60s, early 70s. So
Okay. Yeah,
which,
yeah,
if you knew my dad, it's really hard to imagine that.
yeah.
My dad is so straight-laced and like an engineer that when my mom tells me these stories about his wild youth, I'm just like,
Oh
but
wow.
yeah.
Yeah, I forget what it was, but I think I was watching a podcast recently where they were talking about how, like you said, the pill allowed women to have sex as freely as men could without consequences, basically. So, yeah, that's an interesting thing. I mean, this sort of thing too makes me think about how like how much people politicize gender roles, and they think and they attach these things to history or culture, and they think that these are main problems for things and things like that. Like obviously, like you see a lot of conservatives, for example, saying that the pill was this terrible thing because the nuclear family is this great thing, that it's good for society and it's good for financial growth and stuff like that, and that marriage is better too. But I mean, it seems to me like it's just it's just different. It's not necessarily it's not necessarily better or worse. And like, obviously, it doesn't seem like marriage is necessary for a child to function, because that's what people often talk about in terms of this issue. It seems like it seems to me anyway, like in terms of a child, it's probably better for that child to have two parents, regardless of their gender and regardless of whether they're married or not. But obviously, there are lots of exceptions to that too. Like a single mother or a single father doesn't mean that their child is fucked or anything like that.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think the more caring adults that a child has in their life, the better. You know,
Yeah,
I think that marriage is one very convenient way to make that happen. But as we've seen with the divorce rate, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're creating a stable family for anyone. So,
yeah, yeah,
you know, I think that humans really like rituals, and we like um, things that make us feel like something has changed. You know, I have been with my boyfriend for 5 years, and we're not going to have kids. We have wild cats, but we're not going to have kids. And I think that I would probably like to get married just because I like the idea of making a formal commitment. But I don't need him to support me financially. Um, you know, you get a few perks when you're married. You get a discount on your taxes. Sometimes you get, you know, to go to the hospital if something terrible happens to someone that you're considered family. But like, we don't really have a strong need to get married. But I personally like rituals. I like things like that. I mean, I'm not a very conservative person, and I haven't had a very structured life. And so I kind of pick and choose the structures that I subscribe to. And I think that for us, that would be a nice one to have. But I think also, like, with the way the world is going, like, you have to do what makes sense for your own life and your own family. And the idea of the one size fits all nuclear family doesn't seem very realistic to me.
yeah, yeah, totally. And I mean, like, at the same time too, like there can be financial benefits to not being married if you're in a if you're in a long-term relationship with someone too. Like, I think Dusty was telling me that one of the advantages of him not being not being married to his girlfriend is that they don't have to combine their incomes, in terms of determining whether his daughter can go to particular colleges for free, because they can count only one of their incomes, and then they can be qualified as a low income household. So there can be, I mean, I don't know very much at all about the advantages and disadvantages, but that's a disadvantage that I've heard too. And then also, like, I mean, you can get married for cheap, but weddings can be fucking expensive too. Like my friend who's probably getting married soon, she was telling me that her wedding dress costs like fucking 10 grand, and it might cost $30,000 to get married. And I was like, holy shit. If I'm ever in a long-term relationship with a woman, and she wants to get married, or her parents want an expensive wedding or something like that, I'd say, okay, well, you fucking pay for it then, man. Holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it is expensive to get married. It's expensive to throw a big party.
Yeah. You can just go and get a legal contract at the courthouse or something like that, right?
Yeah, in LA, I think you can get married for $100 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It,
this tradition aspect of it, I guess, that makes people think that it has to be so expensive.
yeah, I mean, I was at Hunter Mott's and Mandy Ainsley's, now known as Huntsley's wedding, and it was lovely. And I don't think it was very expensive. I mean, they had a lot of help from friends and family, but it was just a nice, intimate affair. So you can do it any way you want it. You could
Yeah.
spend $1 million on your wedding if you're Joe Jonas or whoever. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's an Instagram performative aspect to that that's happening also, which is kind of a separate issue. But yeah, because even I'm kind of right at that age where everybody starts like I know a lot of women who are very strong and independent. They actually don't. They know in a relationship. As this happens, there's like this flurry of Instagram and pictures and tons of outfits and all these parties that you have to attend, and I think it just like gets away from people.
Yeah. It's like, hey, you're getting close to 30. How come you're not married yet? Where are those kids?
Well, you spend a lot of money on other people's weddings, and then
Yeah.
I think when you're the fifth person, you say, "Well, where's my time?" You know.
Yeah.
So I get it. I mean,
well, I mean, any party that you're going to throw where people have to fly in from out of town and you have to entertain them and feed them is going to be expensive. But then, like, there's a whole industry, wedding industry, where the markup gets really high. Like, you add wedding to whatever it is, and suddenly it's like 3 times the price or whatever. And I think, it's also, like you said, the Instagram aspect and the reality of our world now that, like, we have access to all of these things that celebrities are selling on Instagram. So, like, the locations and the clothes and the makeup and the whatever, and we start to lose track of the fact that, like, they're getting paid to sell us this stuff, and or are millionaires, or in Kylie Jenner's case, now a billionaire, and can afford all this stuff or get it free as gifts. And the average person is going to spend so much money. I mean, it seems in some ways similar to what I've heard about quinceañeras. Like, families save for their daughter's whole, like, life, 15 years, and then spend like a ton of money to throw these quinceañeras. So I think it's a combination of wanting to have that big, like, party that means everything, and then also, like, just the advertising that goes on for people.
So what exactly is a quinceañera again? Or however you say that?
It's a Sweet 15 party.
Oh, okay.
So
Is it like
when
I had in my head this idea that it might be some sort of equivalent of a bar mitzvah. Is it anything like that, or
bat
totally
mitzvah,
different?
yeah.
Yeah.
I think similar. I don't know. I've never been to one, so I don't think there's the religious aspect where there is for bar and bat mitzvahs.
Okay.
But it's I've seen the dresses and they look very much like wedding dresses.
Okay.
Like very sparkly Barbie ball gown dresses.
in high school who had one, and it's not religious, or at least hers wasn't, and she had a wedding dress and then she had like a court, which was basically like a bridal party, and dancing all night and food and everything. It was huge.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think that Sweet 16 parties either were a thing or just MTV made them a thing with that show. I mean, I didn't have any friends that had a Sweet 16 party when I was young, but yeah, I think, it's people like rituals and parties to, like, mark changes in our lives because we're all just headed towards death. And we have to, like, distract ourselves a little bit and have a good time. It's just, I know a lot of people that have spent a ton of money on their wedding and then they have like this depression afterwards because they spent a down payment on a house to throw a party for a bunch of assholes who just, didn't appreciate it, or it wasn't as fun as they thought, or,
Yeah.
So,
A ritual that's pretty common in today's era that's sort of like a coming of age thing is going out and getting drunk with your friends when you reach legal drinking age. Like since it's 18 here where I came up and or where I grew up in Canada, like that was a thing to get drunk on my 18th birthday. And I remember when I turned 18, because I was still in high school when I was 18. I remember I was 17 one day and then I was 18 the next day, and I didn't feel like I was any different. I'm like, there's this weird thing where I'm considered an adult now. I don't feel like an adult. It's weird, and it's weird how like there are different ages, like there are different legal drinking ages, obviously. Like it's 18 in some places in Canada and it's 19 in other places, and then obviously it's 21 in the States. So I don't know, that was kind of random. I was just thinking about that because it's sort of another ritual.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think everyone pretty much gets hammered or their friends get them drunk on their 21st birthday, that I can remember at least.
Yeah.
All my friends were younger than me, so I didn't really do that. But we definitely, when my younger friends turned 21, we did. There's like, they have like 21 shots in a night, which is just
Holy crap.
I mean, I don't know if that's as much a ritual as just like, I don't know. Maybe it's ritual. Maybe it's just something people feel like they have to do because now they have the power to do it. But
any connection to your Irish heritage there?
I mean, I have been a heavy drinker a big chunk of my life. Not so much now because I'm old and tired and too busy. But yeah, I mean, my dad's side of the family, the Fogartys, are all heavy drinkers. My grandfather was an alcoholic.
Wow.
And my dad apparently was a heavy drinker until I was about 2 years old, and then he just quit drinking. But yeah, I mean, I think lots of cultures, alcohol is a poison that is really difficult to manage for most people. And so I think every culture has an issue with alcoholism. I'm not really sure that there's anybody who's free of that. I mean, I guess maybe cultures where drinking is banned.
Do you think that stops people from drinking?
Not 100%, but my friend who was raised Muslim, she drinks very little. She didn't drink until she moved to America in her late 20s, I think. And I don't think she ever drank very much. I mean, Adam Hansen, since he's not here, we can talk about him. He grew up Mormon, and we had a discussion once where he thinks he's only been drunk maybe a handful of times. And I'm sure there's exceptions, but I think whatever culture you're raised in, really informs a lot of your behavior. Sometimes people go the opposite way when it's really repressive, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's a really heavy like redneck culture here. So like when I first became an adult, like I would say probably more like 19 to 23 or so, because I was older than most of my friends when I turned 18, so I didn't drink that much until I was 19 or so. But I'd say like 19 to 23 or so, that was the phase of my life where I would like go out to the bar literally 2 or 3 times a week with my friends and get drunk almost every time.
Yeah, I mean, I spent part of my childhood in the Caribbean with a bunch of European kids, and the legal drinking age for all of them was like 14, 15, something like that. And so we would all just go to bars and drink, and I was 13, and it was just legal. I mean, I don't know if it's technically legal, but they didn't care in the Caribbean. I think their drinking age might be 15 or 16, but it wasn't strongly enforced. Like maybe if I was 8 years old, they would have frowned, but yeah. And so you know, that was the culture that I lived in as a kid. And then when I moved to America and it felt like I had to hide it, I just lost interest. I was like, I don't want to steal beer from somebody's parent and like hide out in the garage or what. Like that did not seem fun to me at all. Having gone to like bars and parties and like stuff like that, I was just like, why? This makes it not fun at all. And so I didn't really drink again until I was 22 or 23.
So the puritanical taboo worked on you?
I mean, I don't know if it was that, but it was just like, it just seemed like so much trouble for something I had already done. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I know.
I was just kind of like, it felt really silly. Like if somebody suddenly was like, okay, you're not allowed to eat chocolate. I mean, maybe I really like chocolate, so it might be different. But, and like I had to sneak it and like eat it in my bathroom. You know what I mean? Like, then it kind of takes part of the enjoyment out of it. And so I would probably eventually just be like, why bother?
Yeah.
Maybe have a piece here and there, but
I never really did that thing that some teenagers do where I like paid some adult to buy alcohol for us and then go and drink in secret somewhere. Although no, maybe I did do that a few times, but it wasn't like a thing that I was big into, because for the same reasons, it seems like a huge pain in the ass to go to that much trouble to get alcohol and to go to that much trouble to actually drink it.
Well, now Alex is a beer distributor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, hopefully, I mean, we're getting a lot of beer, so I will have extras. Although technically we are not supposed to sell to individuals, so I can gift them to you.
Okay.
But yeah, I had kind of the same thing. I mean, maybe being a girl was a little bit different, at least for me, because it seemed like the boys always got the alcohol.
Yeah,
but there was never
that's definitely a thing.
Yeah, there was never like enough to get drunk, at least for me, like until I went to college, I guess. I don't really remember being drunk in high school. But yeah, I guess it's a cultural thing, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you need to get going pretty soon?
Yeah, I have to run.
Okay.
But it was really nice talking to you guys. I'm sorry that we missed Adam Hansen, but yeah, I guess one thing I would just say in closing about gender roles is I personally don't understand the preoccupation with them, I guess. And I think part of it is that I am a woman, and you know, over history, more and more is opening up to me, rather than feeling like a man where things are maybe being taken away. And so I don't feel that anxiety. I'm also not, you know, a very traditional person, but yeah, I mean, I think, like, I'm not anti-gender roles necessarily. I just think that it should be.
You mean traditional gender roles?
Sure. I mean, I think whatever works for you. Like, I have friends that I know that really like their husband to make all the major decisions and be in charge that way. You know, they're also younger than their husbands, whereas I'm older than my boyfriend. I've had a completely different life than him. So, like, I'm not necessarily against gender roles. I understand why people sometimes cling to them, because it's nice to know what you're supposed to do and what somebody else is supposed to do.
Yeah.
But I think we have to be a little bit, I think we have to, like everything, it's like sometimes it works for you and sometimes it doesn't. So to me, I don't know, like I see a lot. I don't know anybody personally who's preoccupied with gender roles, so I don't know how big of an issue it is, but I see certain people online say things and get really upset about, you know, shifting ideas. And I just personally don't get it, because I'm just like, well, you know, it's a big world and there's room for everybody to be whatever you want. And of course, people are going to shit on you no matter what you do. So you have to be a little bit resilient and also just open to educating them about why you've chosen what you've chosen, I guess.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
And people, it's interesting how much people just generalize about the way, like, about the way the opposite gender is, like, and sometimes it can be true too. Like, I've dated a lot of girls who are really culturally modern in some ways, but then they'll like either act or like directly tell me that they like a strong man who makes all the decisions, who, and they've literally told me sometimes that they want their men to tell them what to do, which is like it always seems strange to me when that happens. But then because that happens, particularly here, because like I said, there's like a lot of sort of redneck culture here where I grew up, then guys who I was always hanging out with would be like, yeah, you gotta be like really direct and like kind of an asshole, dude, because that works really well. And the sad thing is that sometimes that's actually true, but then you assume that that happens generally. But then as I got more mature, I realized, well, that's not really generally true at all. And I'm really like biased by my upbringing and stuff like that. And it's particularly like when I met a lot more women who are not like that at all, it helped me understand that this is just like really a stereotype.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what would really be helpful for everybody is if we spent more time working on ourselves and building our own characters and figuring out what makes us happy. And then you go off in the world and you find somebody that meshes well with that, that you have. But, you know, I mean, I think secretly everybody would like somebody to tell them what to do. It'd be a lot easier to not have to make all the decisions or get to blame somebody else. So I don't know if that's entirely a female thing. I know that maybe traditionally it is, but I know a lot of dudes that also like to be told what to do. So, but I must run for real. It was so nice to talk to you guys. Let's do it again soon. And
Okay.
I'll try to study up on the Minnesota Vikings so we can talk about them.
Good idea. Good idea.
Bye-bye.
All right. All right. So, yeah. So thanks for talking as always, and thanks to everyone. Thanks everyone so much for watching, and thanks to those of you who like and share this video and subscribe to my channel, and especially to those of you who contribute to me on Patreon. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all. All right. Keep having mindgasms, everyone. And you got any final thoughts or plugs there, Alex?
Not really. Just drink type of beer.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks for talking. And yeah, hopefully we can talk again soon with Adam this time as well. So yeah. Thanks a lot, and adios until next time, everyone.